What is happening? Everybody out there in cyber world. What's up, what's up, what's up? Cool, cool. All right. Give me an idea where you guys are coming in from. People are still piling on right now to the webinar. It's about 4:01 right now on Thursday, November 1st. Welcome to November. Did not 2018 fly by? It's crazy. We got one more month until 2019, man. It's insane how fast time is going. We got Orlando, Florida. Jason is on the line. Detroit. What's up, Brandon from Detroit? Cool, cool. Let me see. So that is recording. Good. Cool, cool. Hey, Sean, what's up? What's up from South Jersey? We get Alex from Philly. What's up? What's up? Orlando, Florida. How's it going? Cool, cool. We're going to get started here in just a bit. We got South Beach, Florida, Nashville, one of my favorite places on the planet. Love Nashville. Place is totally cool. Tony here from Philly, Long Island, New York. We got Maryland on here. Perfect. Cool, cool, cool. From Phoenix. What's up, Brandon? From Phoenix. How you doing, man? Gilbert AZ. What's up, Miss Baker? From Gilbert, right down the street here. Well, I'll let far. Gilbert is about probably an hour down the street from where I'm at right now. Cool, cool. All right, so we are going to talk about apartments. We got Chandler AZ. Brandon's on there from Chandler. Cool, cool. You're a little bit of ways down the street here, Brandon. From Illinois. It's on here from Illinois. Cool, cool. So we got all over the entire planet here. So give me a yes or a no if you've ever invested in apartments or bought apartments, typically like 100-unit plus. So give me a yes or a no. We got Rick, no, some no's. Some no, but want to. Cool, cool. Rick, want to. Cool. Alex, no. Phil, no. That's good. Brandon wants to get to about 10,000 units. That's pretty good. No. David, yes. Cool. Developed an apartment community. So that's pretty big. That's killer. So I bet, David, you could probably come on here and help me go through this. And I'm just sharing a case study because I've got a ton of people that asked me. We recently closed on this 128-bed student housing project in Columbus, Georgia. So not like selling a course or doing, it's just literally an impromptu, informational, basically webinar talking about how the project went, how we found the project, basically the key components of it. And Chris, can you grab me that printout on the, can you have Chelsea or somebody or Slack and whatever, just grab that on the printout there. Basically just talking about the deal itself for the purpose of inspiring you to either want to look at apartments, and there's a couple different ways. Obviously, David here has developed an apartment, so actually bought land, entitled the land, went through the process of getting, construction loans, to building the community, to selling off, renting the units, selling off the units, doing whatever he did. I'm sure it's pretty extensive. I don't develop. Thank you. I don't develop. We look to purchase apartments that are already cash flowing. So we're going to look at what's a deal, what's not a deal, and what we specifically look for in a deal. And there's a couple different ways to participate in apartment investing that we're going to talk about and be able to. Yeah, just like Grant Cardone. Cool, cool. Yeah, apartment investing to, that you can participate in, get involved in, and make some money off. So one thing, and we'll get started here. Looks like people are still piling on here. We got a good group of people in here. Sounds good. All right, so if you guys are ready, you guys can hear me okay. It sounds like you can hear me, you can see me okay. Everything's good to go. Let's just talk about apartments, and I'm going to basically bring you through everything we had when it comes to this apartment deal that we closed on here about a month and a half ago, and we're currently managing right now. So just to give an idea of how it works, and then, you know, for anything, if you find an apartment complex that kind of fits the criteria, at least you get to know what to look for. And if you want to tee it up to us, and then we can analyze it and potentially purchase it, maybe work together on it, that would work too. Or potential other deals that come up. Anyways, just trying to, you know, give some good information. We do have another project we're working on right now. It's a phenomenal project. I'll hint to a little bit about that as well as we're talking. So anyways, like I said, it's more of an informational thing about apartments and potentially how you can get involved in apartments. And we also can talk about the market cycle and how that plays into apartments and what we need to watch out for, and be able to basically mitigate risk of any market cycle that we're talking about. So first off, if you don't know me, my name's Sean Terry. Been in real estate now in Phoenix, Arizona for 15 years. I did my first deal back in 2003. And in May of 2003, I was basically got involved in real estate by default. I actually read No Money Down Real Estate when I was in the Marine Corps back in 1992, if all places. I was on ship in the Gulf War, going to war for Desert Storm. I was, 21, 22 years old at the time. And I read, actually it was 21 when we were actually going in the Gulf War, and I was on ship at the USS Tripoli. And I happened to buy the book before I got on ship, Nothing Down Real Estate. And back then I was 21 years old and didn't really know a lot, but I learned a lot about real estate, of buying, properties and stuff, and understanding, trying to figure out cap rates and what works and what doesn't work. So way back when in the Marine Corps, I actually got out in September of 1992, and a very close friend of mine named Scott and I went on a quest in 1992 looking for real estate to purchase. Now, I didn't know anything about market cycles. We were stationed in Southern California, moved to Phoenix, Arizona, because his girlfriend at the time was going to ASU. So we moved to Arizona. I happened to have a bunch of buddies from Vermont in high school. I went to school at South Burlington High School, and we they actually moved from Vermont to Tempe, Arizona, where they went to school at ASU. So I moved in with a bunch of buddies. He, moved in with his girlfriend there, and we said, okay, let's do real estate. We bought this book, No Money Down Real Estate, kind of understood how to do a wrap transaction and how to find deals. We didn't know that there was a savings and loan crisis. We didn't know that the real estate market was in shambles. We didn't know anything about that. We just blindly, naive, went into the market, and we went through the newspaper, and we found this 16-unit apartment complex. I was 22 years old at the time. We called up the seller. I called up the seller. We went over to the apartment complex, and the guy's like, yeah, we'll sell it. $250,000 he wanted for an asking price for 16 units in Scottsdale, Arizona, right? So I saved up some money at the time. My friend Scott saved up some money at the time, and we asked for a loan from his dad, and we put together the deal, and the guy wrapped about $225,000. So we came up with $25,000 collectively between the three of us, and the guy wrapped $225,000, and we bought, when I was 22 years old in 1992, my first apartment complex, a 16-unit apartment complex, right? We lived in one of the units. It was a 2-bedroom unit, and lived on site. We learned how to trim the palm trees. There was a pool on site. I was out there cleaning the pool. We had a laundry facility we managed. We go around. I knew all the tenants by name. We were completely, fully occupied. We would mow the lawn. We would take care of any of the maintenance issues, any of the phone calls. And that was a massive learning experience here at 22 years old. Now, I got out of real estate at that time, and once we sold the property, kind of went in a different direction. for many years, got back into real estate, you know, 10 years later, 10, 11 years later in 2003, when I was driving down the freeway and I heard this guy talking about wholesaling houses, and I didn't really understand what wholesaling houses was. Maybe you you've been a wholesaler or you understand wholesaling, but it's the process of where you get a property under contract from a motivated seller at a discount, hopefully, and you turn around and you line up a cash buyer and you make the spread in between. Well, I went out and for me to find distressed sellers, I went out and knocked on pre-foreclosure doors, right? So I went out and knocked on pre-foreclosure doors, and I would go out every single day and I'd knock on 30, 40, 50 doors, knocking on to try to find if someone wants to sell. Now, I've got rejected, I got spit on, I got dogs run after me, I got people pull guns on me. It was not an exciting thing. And I can tell you, I don't teach how to knock on pre-foreclosure doors because it's such a massive barrier of entry. So there was many times where I went and knocked on a door, I got in my car and I was like, there is no way I can do this. This is insane. You know, it's crazy. Actually, the first door I ever knocked on, I literally almost quit after the first door because it was so intimidating to be able to knock on the door. But I finally got in the car and I was like, listen, I used to be a Marine, for crying out loud. I can go knock on doors. So this was in literally April of May of 2003. I was knocking on pre-foreclosure doors, and finally, I had a guy that wanted to sell the house. Now, there was no Zillow, there was no way to pull comps. I didn't have access to the MLS. You know, there was no mastermind groups, there was no Redfin, there was literally no online. Yeah, I don't think we had cell phones back then in 2000. I don't know, but Google was just barely named. There was no Facebook, right? So I'm sitting there driving around, and I had a guy that says, yeah, I am looking to sell my house. He was in pre-foreclosure. And I set an appointment with him. I didn't even have a contract, right? I didn't have a purchase contract, I didn't have anything. I went to Staples, and I found I went in through Staples there and had a residential real estate contract, and I used that. It was like a 2 or 3 page contract. I was like, okay, I've never filled it out before. I don't know what to do. And literally the guy, said, yeah, come on back. So I came back for the appointment. I met with him like at 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. It was dark out at the time, I remember. And I'm sitting there walking through this house with this guy. He was kind of weird and scary. The pool was completely empty. And I know that the houses were going for about up, 120, 130,000, because I drove around and I called the realtor signs, and tried to get an idea of what the square footage of the property, how many bed and bath, and what it's listed for. So I got the property under contract for it was like 80 something thousand dollars, and like $82,000, $83,000. And I didn't have a buyer's list, didn't have Craigslist, didn't have anyway. So what happened is I went through the newspaper, and there was a guy on there that had all these properties for sale. And he was lease optioning. So I'm like, I wonder if he's going to be buying property. So I happened to call him up. His name was Chad. I met him over to the property, and he gave me an offer. It happened to be like $11,000, $12,000 higher than I wanted. So there was a spread there, or then I was at, $11,000 to $12,000 than I was in it for. And I went out and got a contract with him, got $2,000 earnest money, used the same contract, and then took those contracts to a title company, and they went out and they did a double escrow. And the spread, my first check in May of 2003 was $11,008 and some change. And literally that changed everything for me, because I understood the process and I went through the process. And I always tell people, if they're in real estate, it makes a massive difference in someone's life. If you turn around and they get their first check. Once they get their first check in real estate, it changes everything. Why? Especially in wholesaling, because you understand that immediate cash, right? So what happens is, there's different people that are watching this right now. There's people that have, that are realtors, and their main source of income is commission based by representing buyers and sellers. There's guys in here that are wholesaling properties that have never got a check before. They're trying to talk to sellers, trying to make offers, trying to get deals, and they're still trying to get their first check. There's people that have got a couple deals. They have proof of concept. They understand it works, but they haven't basically built it into a business yet. Then there's guys that have done a lot of business, in real estate wholesaling houses. And then there's guys that don't even do wholesale. Maybe they do fix and flip, or maybe they do commercial deals, and they're going, hey, I'm just going to, come on, kind of check out what this guy does. So wherever you fit, the bottom line is, the cool thing is about real estate, whether you're a real estate agent, whether you're, doing a couple deals or done a lot of deals or whatever, wholesaling houses is in my opinion, whether you're doing, whether you're doing high-end real estate, commercial deals, is finding a property that's essentially distressed or mismanaged, or there's a situation or a story associated with that. Then you're able to get properties either at a discount or at a great deal that makes sense. And instead of buying a property at retail and waiting for long-term appreciation and getting rents, you literally have built-in either cash flow, built-in appreciation from the onset. So understanding the concept of target and marketing and looking for distressed sellers, it goes in roots in everything, whether you're residential real estate, commercial real estate, whatever sector you're in commercial. I mean, if you look at, if you read the book from, what's that book called? Trump's book there. The first book he ever wrote, The Art of the Deal, right? He bought One Wall Street, right? That one book, right? And he bought that one book, and the One Wall Street was a distressed deal, and he bought it for $1 million, and basically assumed all the liens on the property, negotiated all those liens down, was able to turn in to a $100 million deal. So the bottom line is that it starts there. Now, what happens is, for me, is I've, over the past 15 years, obviously up and downs in the market, I've built it into a machine where we're doing millions of dollars a year, in revenue when it comes to wholesale transactions and revenue, $100 million a year when it comes to actual transactional value in real estate, which is phenomenal. And I have an entire team of sales guys, disposition guys, lead managers called, and they're basically running the operation of this machine of talking to houses and buyers and sellers and making offers and stuff like that. So what happens is, it allows me, in the business, to look for the next level type of properties, which is cash flow assets. Now, I can tell you, back in 2005 and 6, I built a large portfolio of about 120 properties, about $36 million worth of properties. And at that time, during that height of the market in 2005, we had an opportunity to sell the portfolio, which we did. And so we acquired got these properties under contract, owned the properties, fixed them up, had a rentals and property. And then we had a group out of California that literally purchased blocks and tranches of our properties over the course of about a 6 to 8 month period. And literally, I had more money coming in during that 2005, 2006 era than it was like insane. It was the market was insane. And I made a stupid mistake back then. And I want to tell you what I learned from it and how to never, and it's going to go back to market condition and where we are in the market condition, and the mistakes I learned and the mistakes I'd never do again, and the research I've done so I'd never make that mistake again. So what happened was I had a huge amount of money coming in that needed to be reinvested back into something, right? So there's different asset, there's land acquisition, there's regular commercial type of buildings, there's mini storage units, there's apartment complexes. I could put back into single family house. I could stick the money in the stock market and hope that the stock market was going bananas then, right? So what happened was I had this windfall of millions and millions of dollars from selling this portfolio of properties, and I decided to buy raw land. Right? At the height of the market, right? Raw land. Buy raw land, entitle raw land, and then potentially sell raw land to home builders. Now, that, my friends, was probably the dumbest thing that anybody could ever do on the planet. I raise my hand. That was the stupidest move that anyone could ever do. Right? I was naive. right? I didn't really understand market cycle at the time. Remember, I was in 1992. I bought an apartment complex when I was coming out of 1992 when I was a kid. I kind of got out of that and got back into real estate. I was, you know, I didn't listen to, everybody thought the market was just going to continue to go up and we're still going to make millions of dollars and everything's fine and everything's great, da, 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 right? Well, it didn't. And I thank God every day that that actually did happen because I learned a lot, right? And I learned a lot. Now, personally, there's a lot of work I had to do on a personal level. And there's a lot of things I learned from it that as we go through future market cycles, I don't make stupid mistakes again, okay? So what happened during that time, and again, we're talking about market cycle at this time, is I bought properties, right? They were raw land. So first off, they didn't cash flow, right? Now, the good thing is I bought properties that were non-recourse loans on the properties. They were non-recourse. They were higher interest rate. We're paying about 12% interest, but they were basically non-recourse, but they were short-term loans. They were short-term. So non-recourse, short-term loans, and we were buying on speculation. There's speculation. So we were anticipating that we buy property. We did general plan amendments. We did rezoning. We did replatting and engineering of the property. And then we put it out to the market to sell the home builders after we got everything lined up. Well, the problem is that cycle takes about 18 to 24 months. And what happened in 2005, 2006, and as the market crashed, we were exiting on a downturn in 2008, 9, and 10. Now we're trying to exit out of these properties during a downturn. Well, if you understand, and at the time, I owned about $30 million worth of land. We bought, 10 acres over here by Cave Creek in the 101 for basically an apartment development that we were doing on that one. We owned 538 lots out in Tucson in a pretty established area. Owned another 128 lots over by Super Bowl Stadium over there by the Glendale Arena that's over there, State Farm Arena, I think it's called now. We owned 166 lots right in the middle of a subdivision, right next to a school, great school, down in by Lower Buckeye and Broadway down there, completely built out area. And owned another 10 acres in Glendale, right by Midwestern University. So during that, I mean, we had really, they were considered infill locations that were purchased and they were entitled and brought through, but down through a crisis. So what happened was, number one mistake is they didn't cash flow. Number two mistake is we bought on appreciation. Number three mistake is we had short-term loans on the property, right? And what happens when you do that, you don't have cash flow, you're buying on appreciation, you have short-term loans. What happens is, and you're going down through a market cycle like this, and we're in Phoenix where market cycles go like this. It's like Phoenix, Nevada, parts of California, and Florida have massive swings in values. So I was in a situation where literally, had $30 million worth of land and got clobbered, right? Now, never filed bankruptcy. One thing I did learn was you keep constant communication with all your lenders, keep constant communication with all that. But literally, that was the dumbest mistake I ever had. I lost millions and millions of dollars. And I had, basically situations where it's my own personal cash, a ton of my own personal money, and it was a big mistake. So, but what happened was, as I came out of that situation, I found myself, in 2008, illiquid, right? In a liquid situation. And then I got humbled because I thought I was, everything I touched turns to gold, right? I made millions of dollars in real estate. Yeah, it was no problem. Everything was great. And what happens is you think it's you that was so great. Well, and then I realized that it wasn't me. It was the market. And some people right now might be watching this. You might have just got involved in real estate in the past 3 to 5 years, right? And you think it's you because the market's going up. Inventory's decreasing, properties are selling off the shelf, spreads are getting bigger, and you're making a ton of money, and you think it's you, and you might be getting cocky going, hey, I'm doing great. Well, wait till a market cycle happens, and then you kind of have basically a coming to Jesus of what's happening and going, hey, so you want to have strategies that are essentially, that are, it's not market determined, right? And so you're not worried about any type of market risk, or you're making correct investments that are not, affected by market swings and market cycles. And there's a couple of ways, and we're going to talk about that right now. The bottom line is the mistakes that I made during those times were, number one, it was the wrong time to buy land acquisition for those specific times. And number two, is that it was the I was planning an 18-month exit on those properties on forced depreciation with no cash flow. So the good thing, right, that was the bad thing, that sucked. The good thing on the other side of the coin of what was the silver lining, right, just like Napoleon Hill talks about in Think and Grow Rich. If you've never read that book, I highly suggest to read it. In that book, he talked about, there's always good. You can find good in any type of bad situation. So what was the good? The good is that I stopped, right? And I looked and I go, okay, two things that came out of that. Number one is, how would I never have that happen again? How would I never have that happen again, right? So I looked at everybody, even through Phoenix, who made it, who was successful, who made it through the crash, who thrived during the crash, right? And then number two is I basically had the time to sit down with my wholesaling business and go, if I'm going to re-engineer a brand new wholesaling business, how would I do it? And literally built and structured a wholesaling operation I currently run now that does millions and millions of dollars of transactions, where I run from a 90-minute Monday morning meeting. I'm able to go to my beach house in Southern California, for a month. I go on tons of great vacations, have tons of the most important thing that everybody wants. And it's not a, Rolex watch. I got one. You have a luxury car, got one of those, So, but the most important thing that everybody wants is one thing, and that's freedom to do what you want with who you want, when you want. So the bottom line is that the biggest things that came out of that, number one, was who are the people? So I did massive amounts of research, talked to tons of different people. I joined masterminds groups with some of the smartest people in the country when it comes to real estate, surrounded myself with where the biggest money invests, in how they put their money, what they look at. And I basically came out of it on the other side, and the people that made it did a couple different things, a little shift that people that didn't make it, right? Which we're going to talk about, right? And number two, I was able to build a wholesaling organization that just crushes right now, and it allows me the freedom to be able to do amazing things. So if you look at, first off, the benefit, what's the benefit of owning apartments? Well, huge benefit of owning apartments is, and everybody knows that, is where you get cash flow, right? Cash flow is huge. Versus owning stocks or putting your money in the stock market, right? Because it's a lot of times you don't know what if China does something with trade with United States, or the president says something or whatever, then boom, the market swings up and down like crazy. Or we got the election happening here in next week. Who knows how that could affect the market and what that's going to really do. So it's a very choppy type of thing of having all your retirement and your eggs in one basket when it comes to putting your money in the stock market. What's the great thing about apartment investing is, not only do you get quarterly cash flow that comes in every single quarter, which is phenomenal, but you also get the depreciation advantage of ownership, which we'll talk about. So the number one thing that I learned, I'm going to tell you basically the tipping point and the little thing that made the massive difference in the people that made it and the people that didn't were a couple different things. Now remember, I bought land that I was banking on appreciation. So the people that did incredible during that time, first off, they bought properties and they didn't care about appreciation. Their business model, their whole business model was not revolved around appreciation, right? By buying a property on appreciation. So here's the thing. If you're fixing and flipping properties right now, right? I would highly suggest that you be very cautious when it comes to fixing and flipping properties with tight margins, right? Fix and flipping properties going into a market cycle, guess what? I was doing it. You can get caught with your pants down. So when it comes to our specific criteria, our company criteria, when it comes to fixing and flipping, we have a spreadsheet. We have a spreadsheet that has it has the optimistic, the most likely, and a pessimistic approach on a particular deal. And we look at the pessimistic exit price. We got pessimistic exit price, the most likely exit price, and optimistic exit price, right? Then it has all the costs associated when it comes to money cost, holding cost, buying cost, selling cost, and everything, and it has a profit at the end. If our pessimistic spread with all the cost on a fix and flip is $100,000 or more, then that triggers for us a takedown purchase with a renovation. Why? Because we have a ton of room if we have to fire sell it or reduce it. So instead, we don't make 100,000, we make 50,000. Big deal. It's still a pretty good deal, and that's great. We're not emotionally tied to it. It's literally an investment deal. But a lot of people, what happens is they get the rush into the market and they're buying properties. And what happens is their spreads go from 30 to 20 to 25. And now they have 10 properties on the market, 7 properties on the market. And the market takes a little bit shift. Days on market increase, right? And people tend to do less on the rehab, more, and try to price their properties higher with less on the rehab. Now their properties sit on the market. Now they go through this reduction process and then they're screwed, right? So when it comes to this process right here, you got to be very selective, but then you go, well, what am I going to do to, basically survive? Well, obviously wholesaling, what's great about wholesaling in this business, if you're in a market cycle during wholesaling, is that the only difference is in 2008, when people were buying properties at 50, 60,000, we would offer 20, 30,000. So what happens is you just adjust your offer price and your exit price. You're still selling low, but you can adjust it as the market cycles. Why? Because we're literally signing a contract and selling the contract versus actually closing on the property and turn around and selling it. So the risk is literally all in your marketing money, right? And in the ability to convert those leads into deals. That's where the risk lies versus buying 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 properties, putting a bunch of money in renovating, sticking them on the market and hoping to make a profit. That's banking on appreciation. So one of the biggest things I learned during a market correction or a market cycle is, number one, never bank on appreciation. The property must stand on its own from either a cash flow standpoint or a value standpoint to be able to execute a purchase during that time. Now, I didn't do that with the land. That's why I got crushed. The second thing is long-term debt. Most fix and flip properties have 6-month to a year debt, right? Well, guess what? We're not talking about fix and flip. On our land transactions that we did, we had about I think it was like an 18-month debt window, 18-month debt. That's not a long time with, when you're going through an entitlement process in a downturn, right? So what we did on apartments, and I'm going to get into this case study and kind of show you what we've done on this. The bottom line is the biggest thing I learned, and the little shift that you can make, and I can tell you this is probably the most important thing that we could talk about right now, because it's going to happen in the future. I think the next couple of years are going to be absolutely phenomenal, and the market's going to be great. I would be a little bit concerned around 2020 during the election time of what happens there, but I think the market's going to be a great market between now and then. Again, But when it comes to fix and flips, you have to have a certain criteria so you're not caught with your pants down. Wholesaling, obviously you got to do is adjust the price. And we're talking about cash flow properties and apartments right now. You got to have properties that, number one, cash flow from the start. They have to cash flow. You cannot bank or hope or have your business model evolve around making it cash flow. You can't do that, right? It has to cash flow from the start. That is the first criteria when it comes to mitigating the risk of a market cycle that's coming. Number two is long-term debt. Now, I know people right now that are buying apartment complexes and they're buying these distressed, apartment complexes with 40, 50% occupancy rates, and they're going in and doing massive 18, 19-month renovations on them. They're releasing up the property and they're turning around and selling that property, right? And what happens is you're banking on appreciation. You typically have short-term loans on that property and you're hoping to exit, right, at the end of that term. Well, there's a lot of things that could go right in that situation, and there's a lot of risk that could go wrong, right? And me personally, I do not want to put investor money at any type of risk whatsoever. Now, is there risk investing? Of course there is, whether it be stock market, real estate, anything like that. The bottom line is I don't want to be in a position of putting an investor in any type of risk. Now, could the returns be higher? Could there be more money? Could there be that? Yes, right? Absolutely. But the deals that we look at, the deals that we invest in, the deals that we raise capital for, the deals that we syndicate, guess what? They're not these big where you can make 18% return on your money, because there's risk associated with that and they have potential of lose a huge amount of money. Ours is safe money, right? It's the safe long-term money. Why? Because of these reasons. I would prefer that. Why? Because you can sleep at night. The investors can sleep at night. And it makes sense. And I've been through the other scenario and it sucks because you don't sleep at night. So number one is do not bank on appreciation. Number two is must have long-term debt. Must have long-term debt structured on the property, right? Must have long-term, right? And the third thing is got to cash flow from you're buying cash flow from the start. Now, if you buy a property, 60%, occupancy, let's say half the building was fire damaged, and you're going to buy it and you have to kind of clean out the tenants, or it's a real bad thing and you're going to renovate it and kind of clean out the tenant base because there's a lot of crime in there. Well, guess what? It doesn't cash flow from the start, right? You're banking on a business plan to get it to cash flow with short-term debt on it to try to make it, because typically you're going to get a bridge loan on it to get the property, renovated up to code and leased up so you can put future debt on it, or you sell that property. Well, guess what? That's a ton of risk, right? A ton of risk. All right, so those are the big three things I can tell you going into the future here of what to look for when it comes to either buying apartments and raising capital with your investors, or you investing in a specific project, or you looking at a specific project. Now, is it sexy? Is it like, sizzling hot? I got this smoking deal, 60% occupied. We're going to put a bunch of money into it. We're going to raise a bunch of capital. You're going to get 20, 25% returns on your money and it's going to crush. Yeah. If you've got Vegas money, put that in, right? If you got Vegas money, you want to go to Vegas, you got a couple $100,000 you want to go to Vegas with, and you want to bet it, it's a bet, then put it into something like that, right? And you can cross your fingers and hope it works. But I wouldn't put your safe money, retirement money, money you're going to live on for the rest of your life in something like that. Absolutely not. I would put something in more of a safe bet. All right, so let's get through this project right here. I'm going to show you basically what happened. And I've got a bunch of questions I'm going to, I want to answer going through this project. So I'm going to kill my camera if you guys don't mind, so I can focus here. All right, then we'll get into it. All right, so basically this is University Crossing. I'm going to go through this project as a case study so you guys could understand just what we talked about of mitigating that risk and understanding how this lines up with that methodology. Now, first off, I want to give a huge credit to Corey Peterson from Kahuna Investments. He's put together a phenomenal, he was a general partner on this deal. a phenomenal individual, has great ethics. I've known him. He lives here in Gilbert, Arizona. Known him for years. He's a really, really good person. And I don't tend to do, I don't like to align myself, especially business-wise, especially company-wise or LLC-wise, with people that I don't literally trust, respect thoroughly, and am known for, known for years when it comes in to something like that. So the bottom line is, really, really good person. So, and great formula when we talked about this. So, and he has come up with a pretty much the entire blueprint, and I kind of knew what I was looking for when it comes to the long-term cash flow, when it comes to the appreciation of what to look for. And he came from he came from Phoenix too, and we talked, and we have very similar alignment when it comes to an investment strategy. And what happened was, and I'm going to talk about how this property came up, and what happened was, and how it how it aligns. But first off, when it comes to area, so people ask, why did you pick Columbus, Georgia? That was the first question, right? Why did you pick Columbus, Georgia? Well, number one thing is that we wanted to stay out of high cap rate swing states. Phoenix is a high cap rate swing state, meaning it swings from back in 2008, where cap rates shot up to 7, 8, 9, 10%. And 2005 cap rates are down to 2, 3%, right? So that's a massive swing. And what cap rates do, cap rate determines the value of the property, right? Of what the market cap rate is. And so we looked for properties, and I'll talk about the management company and kind of how they have a play and what they do. But we looked for low cap rate swing properties where cap rates have either stabilized over a long period of time, or there's not a massive swing in cap rate. So Columbus, Georgia happened to be one of the geographic locations where the cap rates do not swing significant. We're talking less than 0.5 point to 2 points, in a swing over a historic, 8 to 10 year period. So when you look at something, and this is over a market cycle, looking back to 2008 and historically of where cap rates are. What that does, it mitigates risk of market, right? Mitigates risk of market. So if you have a massive cap rate swings, what's going to happen? If you catch yourself in a scenario where the market is in a very high cap rate swing and you're forced to refinance during that time, you're going to be screwed trying to refinance the property of exiting your current debt. So number one, we look for properties across the country that does that. Iowa is great. Indianapolis is great. Columbus, Georgia. Parts of Georgia are great in there. Parts of North and South Carolina are great. Texas is Houston, Dallas, those areas. Austin are higher in cap rate swings. Phoenix, Florida, Nevada, California are very high cap. They have large cap rate swings, which we stay out of in those particular areas. So that's number one, why we picked that specific area, okay? So if I scroll down here and I look at over this period right here, first off, let's look at proximity of where the property is. It's located, and this is what's called a student housing project, right? And the story behind this deal is it was not professionally managed by a professional management or a student housing management company that understood how to optimize a property with student housing. So literally it was an owner operator of the property, wasn't really maximizing it, but it cash flowed right out of the gate, which is phenomenal. So it's located in Columbus, Georgia, right? And if you look at it right here, this is Columbus State University. It's a huge university right here. And the property is literally located right here. Here's Columbus State University, directly across the street. So let's talk about you looking at potential deals. And you obviously want to have properties that have really good locations and they're located in either high traffic areas, and they're not like a property that's kind of tucked, you know, back off. But, you know, when you got to look at properties, one, that can cash flow from the start, two, that has a story behind it, like it's owner operated, three, that has a really good proximity in a location, something like this. And then we talk about business models. So here's University Crossing right here. We've got these buildings here, this building here, here's the clubhouse. And if I actually go to the website, you can see here's what the buildings look like, built in 2006, right here. Here's the bedrooms of the units, right? Here's the floor plans of the unit, and here's 24-hour fitness ready directly across the street from CSU. We actually went and visited the property. People were walking back and forth to the property from the actual campus, which is a great on-site maintenance company. We have an on-site, you know, obviously management company. It's currently managing it right now, which is phenomenal. So if I look at photos, yeah, I mean, some great photos. It has a pool on the property. There's University Crossing. And basically what we're doing is we have the newer buildings right here. There's also older buildings that we're currently renovating on the property. So if I go back to the map right here, these buildings are the older buildings. We're bringing them up to code right here. And this is where we, if you see on the plan, if I go back to the plan here, the executive summary of what we're doing, here, there's 16 units that we're going to be renting. The 48 units were actually built in 2009. So basically, what we do is we're putting $250,000 established for immediate capital improvements on that property. And this property right here, we're not doing a massive, significant overhaul. Like I said, the property is currently cash flowing. So we're going to update existing vacancies on the property. We're going to set up a whole nighttime lighting system that's currently being installed, solar screens on all windows, deploy property Wi-Fi. One of the biggest complaints and security cameras on the property. One of the biggest complaints from the students was that the Wi-Fi sucked. Well, these kids are students. They don't want to have Wi-Fi that sucks. So we're going to completely update that. And aggressive marketing on the street level that can basically get the apartments filled. So once we renovate these units completely, we're able to increase the rents of these 16 units here, and then we're able to update these current vacancies on here, the lighting program. The other thing we're going to do, and this is more, now, this is not a huge, massive interior, exterior renovation model, right? This is not huge. This is a very conservative model. Like I said, cash flows from the start. So operational changes requires management personnel to live on site. We've got requires the maintenance of personnel to live on site. So at the time, they didn't have a management company that lives on site. Now, interestingly enough, and I'm going to talk to you about the management company and their role in the particular deal. But I sat across the table. We had dinner with the owner of the management company, David, and he was explaining to me about turnover on a particular apartment unit. For an example, the industry standard for turnover is typically 2 to 4 days for a property that becomes vacant, or a unit that becomes vacant and then gets occupied again. Typically 2 to 4 days. Right? Their turnover is typically on their turnover in their company is about 12 hours. And he was explaining the process of how they do that and what they do prior with the tenants that they know are going to move out of the property, which is huge. So having an on-site management company allows that turnover a lot quicker. Another thing they're not doing is they didn't have ACH for set up where they have automatic deposit for all the students, right? Number two, a thing that they didn't do is they didn't have the parents sign the lease. So they had a high concessions number on there, which is in loss, like concessions and credit loss. Their concessions and credit loss were extremely high because they weren't being able to collect, because the students were, you know, some of the students were just bailing in the middle of the night and the parents weren't tied to it. So what we're going to do is we're going to tie the parents to the lease. We're going to set them up on an ACH where it's an automatic deposit, or actually it's going to pull right directly out of your account. The other thing too on this particular deal is that if you remember, if you look at a student housing project versus a regular apartment complex, we're renting out a per room basis, right? A per room basis. So if you look at this, right, you got 96 student, 2-bed, 2-bath. These are 96 eventually leases that are paying, and 32 leases for a total of 128 versus a normal apartment complex, which now you're renting out the unit versus actually the bedroom. Now, the other thing too is what they weren't doing is they weren't doing annual leases on here. Now, some of you might have kids and they might be going to college and they might have been signing leases on them. They weren't doing annual leases. They were doing basically just 8 to 9 month leases with the students, and they were stuck over the summer because all the kids moved out and they were losing rental income that way. Well, guess what? That's an operational change that we're going to come in and change, and those little tweaks make a huge impact in the bottom line. So, right, people ask, okay, how do you find a deal? We'll talk about that. How do you know if it's a deal or not a deal, right? Now, let me go and kind of go into this right here about the, this is kind of property R15, net NOI right here is 367. So that's NOI, that's net operating income. This right here is a holy grail number that determines value of the property, purchase price over $5 million, $79,000 a unit right here. So if we look at the, I'm gonna go down here and look at the numbers. So what happens is this. Now, again, I want to give a shout out to Corey at Canoe Investments. It actually developed this spreadsheet. It's a great spreadsheet, kind of explains what it does and how it works. The trailing 12 is currently what they're currently operating at, right? And then we have year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, and year 5. Year 1 is to get in. Year 2 is to get the property right. So we're going to renovate those existing 16 units that are the older units, get those up to code. We're going to get the lighting system up to code. We're going to get the Wi-Fi up to code. We're going to get the property. So year 1 and 2 in the business model is to get the property to the highest and best value we can. Year 3, year 4, and year 5 is to maximize the current revenue and decrease the expenses as much as possible. Now, if we look at this right here, and we start working on it, look at out of the gate right here. Just look at year 1 operational versus their trailing 12 operational, right? We got vacancy numbers right here, of course, 10%, 8%, 6% across the board. Concessions, look at their concessions number right there, 95,000, then it goes to 58, 26, 27. That's what we're talking about of getting the students to sign. So their concessions and credit loss are 11%. We're going to take it from 11 to 7 to 3 across the board. Now, these numbers are standard across the current management company's 3,000 units that they currently already operate. So we got rental income, we got RUBS. Now, what is RUBS? Utility. This is residential utility reimbursement system, right? So it's RUBS is where you basically install RUBS and you can get reimbursed for the utilities, which is considered additional income. So they have not installed RUBS, if you can see in their trailing 12s, but year 1, 38, then 62, then 79, then 80 and 82. Now, this management company is incredibly successful for installing RUBS on a program, right? So if you look at it, 10,000, between 10,000 and 8, that's a $70,000 increase on one line item by installing RUBS, right? Huge, that's massive, right? So we keep going. They are running at a 70% income to expense ratio, right? A normal operating should be anywhere around 46, 47%, upwards to 51 to 52%, right? Anywhere around there is if there's a red flag when you're underwriting a property like this, is that, look at 70%. If they're massively above the 50% range, right, then there is potential opportunity, right? So if you look at right here, look at their total operating expense, 480 versus 414. So right out of the gate, their NOI from the get-go is 206. Our NOI year one is 367 just on the takeover, right? That's over $100 plus and $60,000 increase in revenue, right out of the get-go. So if I was going to take, 160,000, divided by, say, 6%, right? That is an immediate increase in value of a property at 160,000 divided by 6%, 6 cap, is $2.6 million in value right out of the gate just on operations. Not even including renovations, that's strictly on operations. Now, if we look down here, right? So this is what you're looking for opportunities. This is when you're looking for deals. You want to put their trailing 12 on here and then look for the opportunities right here to be able to run it at an operationally a better way on a price per unit that they can, right? So debt service right here, cash flow before taxes. So right out of the gate, the first year it cash flows $172,000 a year right out of the gate. 220 second year, 249, and then these are interest only because we have interest only loan on it. Then it goes 196, and then it goes to 213, right? So if I go back here when it comes to structure, let's talk about the structure real quick because we got a lot of people asking about that. Is that 25% down, right? 25% down, 1.25 million. Capital improvements, right? Loan fee, the cost to, and we got a $3.75 million loan. Now, this is a Fannie Mae non-recourse loan secured by the property. Now, you have to basically qualify, for this loan based upon your net worth. Now, there's two ways to do it. One, if you have the net worth, right, of a $5 million property, then you're able to qualify for this loan on the property, especially if you have a good management company behind it that gives them confidence that it can be run and operated correctly, number one. If you don't have the net worth, then you can basically find a loan sponsor. A loan sponsor is someone that will basically put up their net worth for a small percentage of the deal so you can qualify for the loan. Okay, so in this case, we are able to qualify for the loan. So that's a $3.75 million loan. 25% down is $1.26 million. Due diligence costs $10,000 in diligence. Bank reserve of how much the bank requires in a reserve account. Legal cost to set up the private placement memorandums. Acquisition fee of $202,000. So the total cap raise is capital raise is 1,850, right? So what we did is obviously we invested capital ourselves, but we raised the additional funds, $1.85 million to close the transaction. And we'll talk about what that looks like when it comes here in a second, when it comes to raising capital for a project like this. So you might be a real estate wholesaler, might be an investor. I want you to, first off, don't be afraid of a big $5 million deal. And a $5 million deal, honestly, is really, really not a big deal. It is a big deal, but it's not a big deal in comparison to what, some of the big real estate plays that are out there. You're talking, 50, 60, $100 million projects. $5 million deal is something that can be done. If you're a wholesaler and you've been doing a couple deals, and you made a couple $100,000 a year wholesaling, and you want to get into this, don't be afraid of a project that comes across your desk, and don't immediately in your mind go, oh, I can't do that. I want this to be able to inspire you of at least saying, yes, I can do it, and start looking at it and diving into it and make sure it checks all the boxes. Does it cash flow from the start? Is it in an area where there's a very low cap swing, where that means the cap rate's not swinging dramatically and it's pretty much stabilized over a course of over time? You know, am I banking on appreciation to pull the trigger on this thing? Well, think about it. We don't want to raise $1.85 million from investors if if there's a massive risk involved, right? You know, if we look at this right here, you know, like I said, it cash flows from start. If you look at the numbers right here, this is a very, very stabilized property already out of the gate without even us doing anything. And we can come in on an operational standpoint and make it even better, you know, from that standpoint out of the gate. So you look at what's the potential risk, you know, of something like this. What if the market crashes? Well, let me show you. Look at the debt. This is a 10-year fixed loan at 5%, and the first 3 years are interest only. So think about that. 10-year fixed, basically 10-year fixed debt loan with a 30-year amortization, right? So 30-year am, 10-year fixed. So what happens is, you know, now the exit on this is 5 years, right? So our business plan is to exit on the property in 5. So 5 years comes along, we have the opportunity to sell the property. Great. More likely, we'll refinance the property and be able to pay investors out of the particular property. But what if the world goes to hell and it goes back to 2008 again, and the market crashes? Is investors' money protected? That's the biggest thing investors want to know is my money protected? Can I lose? Am I going to lose my money? Well, people look back at 2008. Well, there's people that lost millions of dollars in 2008. I personally lost millions of dollars in 2008. Why? Because the market crashed and you were either forced to refinance, you're forced to exit on a property during a market crash. Well, if you look at this right here, if you're, guess what? A 10-year debt with a 30-year amortization on the property, right? Annual debt service of $266. So when it comes to the security and the security of capital, and the number one mission of any project is to preserve capital, preserve the capital, do whatever you have to do to preserve capital. So one rule of thumb, and one of the questions is, how do you know if you have a deal or not? One rule of thumb, and this is from Corey Peterson, which is great on this, is that number one is that the management right here, management, right? Manager's cash flow. This is what we're getting paid as managers of the property, and we're getting the 61, 109, 138, 85, right? And this is getting paid as cash flow annually. This is what the managers are getting. So it has to be a minimum of that 111, right? At least a minimum of 25% of this number, right? So we don't want this number to be zero. We won't want it to be $10,000. We don't want it to be $2,000, because here's the thing. If the property gets in trouble, or if there's a fire, or if something happens like that, and obviously there's insurance for that actually covers rents and stuff. But if there's something catastrophic that happens for some reason, we and are taking the $61,000 that the managers make and are making sure the investors are paid no matter what. Okay, that is part of the criteria of being part of the management crew, of making the decision that, listen, we're not making a dime until the investors are 100% whole, right? And that is a philosophy going in. I know a ton of people in this business, that's not their philosophy. You know, they're like, if it makes money, great. If it doesn't, oh well, right? Well, that's not a good philosophy, right? Because now you're putting the investors' money at risk. So you want to have a cushion, a significant cushion, and the cushion right here that you know that you have excess cash flow that you can pay investors if you have to, and that's the agreement of all the managers going in, and that's, again, of making sure you're partnering with the right people. So that's number one. So number two, 10-year fixed long term. So that is the deal structure of this particular project, right? $1.8 million needed, $3.75 million loan, 25% down. That's the down payment on the loan, 5% interest only, 10-year fixed on the project. Now, from an investment standpoint, so what the question is, what do you offer investors, right? So remember, this project is already closed. Obviously, we're not looking for investors on this project. It's already done. We've already raised capital for it. It's a complete deal. You can't invest in this deal. It's already done, right? So I'm not pitching you on an investment. It's already over. We've already raised the capital on it. We're good. So I'm giving you after the fact case study of how this works, right? So for the investors who did invest in this project, this is essentially what it looked like. So this is a sales price and a 5-year exit, right? Exiting at a 7.5, conservative 7.5 cap, exiting out of property with a $496,000 that came from here. Right? $496,000 came from the 5-year NOI, and that's how you determine value of the property. Gives us a value of about a little over $6.6 million. So you're not getting, it's not a massively huge, right? You know, you're not like ridiculously rich on the thing, right? So equity right here. This is total distributions right here. After you pay back your equity so all the investors get their money back. You got closing costs, right? You got a broker fee in here that you're going to pay a broker for selling the property. You got the loan repayment number and the total excess proceeds, of which the investors get $555,000 and the sponsors get $499,000. Okay, and that's basically how that works. So an investor in this thing, they get what's called a 6 and 6. They get 6% cash flow each year, and then 6% on the exit for a total of $60,000 or a 12% return on their capital on a incredibly safe investment, right? Incredibly safe investment because it already cash flows from the start. So there's a lot of people who go, well, I can get 15, 18% return. But again, what's the risk factor? What's the risk factor, on something like that? This is great. And a lot of the investors that put money in these projects were people that have money in their IRA, people that were looking for a safe place to put money versus a high risk. Now, this isn't Vegas money. This is low risk money that will produce cash flow every single month. This is where you want to preserve capital versus rolling the dice on something. Here's some pictures of the property that we already showed you. Talks about proximity of the neighborhood, which is incredibly important. The college, the university, and I'm going to show you a couple other things that's I think is important. Now, here's Corey Pearson. He's a managing partner, really a great guy. Him and his wife Shelly are phenomenal. He's a really good person, knows this stuff inside and out. And I've learned a lot from him. He's been very generous with his time and energy and stuff, and learning a lot putting this deal together. So definitely kudos out to Corey. He's done a phenomenal job. So this is the basically marketing package of the particular deal. Let's go talk about right here, the management company. The management company is Alexander Forrest, and what they do is they work specifically with high net worth individuals. They have a very boutique team that works together, and which is pretty cool. But what they do is they take a 20% stake in the deal, right? So they have vested interest to make the deal successful. They do not work with everybody. They only work with a handful of people. But they come in and take ownership. Now, here's the cool thing that makes all this different, because there's asset management and then there's investor management. So the asset, these guys are incredible at asset management. They specialize in student housing. They specialize in optimizing. They come in, they renovate the properties, they bring on the management team, they hire the management crew, they have the entire process, and they optimize the asset to make the most amount of money with the least amount of expenses in the shortest period of time available, right? And they do that, why? Because they take a 20% stake in the company, in the asset, and they're very very hands-on when it comes to that project. That's number one. Number two, right, which is phenomenal. Not only do they do asset management, but they do investor management, because there's two components when it comes to this business: it's asset and it's also investor. So the cool thing is, and I'm going to show you what they do, is they provide a full transparency of their basically of their asset management and investor management. So they collect all the money, they pay all the bills, they manage all the accounts, and they pay all the investors quarterly. They provide all the K1s and the tax reporting. They have an entire accounting department right here, accounting and compliance department, part of their team that literally manages all the money, the investor money, and everything like this. The cool thing, I mean, these guys have been in business for 23 years. They're incredibly stable, and they're really, really good people that run the operation. So one of the things they provide, which I think is phenomenal, is every single month, and here's an example, basically report that they distribute. But the bottom line is every single month, an investor, right, gets this report of every investor and manager that gets this report. And this is a asset management report and a financial report. So they'll go through anything in the repairs they did to the property. They got obviously a complete dashboard. Now, this comes every month to every investor on every property they have. Now, here's some of the cool things about this. They'll show you on here the rents, right? Basically the rent increases that happen, right? Lease amounts that happen, increase in rents. This is 110.65. So they're always trying to increase the rents on here. We got renewals that happened on here, so that all the renewals and the bump in the renewal, look at the bump in the renewals right there, that happened. So they're always trying to increase the revenue and decrease the expenses across the board. Now, and I'm going to go real quick. They give you a full-blown accounting of every line item that's ever happened on the property, that's currently happening for the month on the property. And here's the crazy thing. At the bottom of this report, they are so transparent to all the investors. They literally provide bank statements. They provide bank statements of the property to all the investors that are invested in the property and the managers for a 100% transparency. I don't know any type of asset management, investor management company that is this transparent with their investors. So it's a phenomenal service, which is amazing. So let me answer a couple of the questions. So the question was, how did we find the property, right? How do we find the property? Well, first, what happens is these guys having a complete acquisition team of about 5 to 6 people, and they underwrite about 1,300 properties a year in specific locations where the cap rate swings are low. Okay, so they're not picking Florida, they're areas where there's massive cap rate swings, right? So that's number one. And what they do is underwrite it, and then they tee up properties to their investor base, right? So this property was teed up to Corey. Corey came to me and said, "You want to do the deal together?" And we decided to do the deal. Is it the pack or is it? Sorry about that. My sound went out, guys. Apologize. All right. So how do you know if it's a deal? We talked about the offer process is going to be different than a normal wholesale deal. So the offer process, essentially, once you get an offer, what you do is you visit the property. Once you visit the property, then you submit an LOI, and then the LOI, which is called a letter of intent, either gets accepted or not accepted or countered, and then you go into the negotiation and into the days. once you have an established and agreed upon letter of intent. So all these different properties, you know, for different, and a lot of them, you never hear anything back or just get swept up under the table. That you fly